Imagine waking up with a severe head wound and zero memory, only to realize you possess the lethal reflexes of a master assassin. When the doctor who saved him is abducted by a ruthless terrorist, this amnesiac's dormant killer instincts awaken. But his hunters aren't random thugs. They are brainwashed killers tortured and raised alongside him in a starvation well. Can this human weapon save the woman he loves? Or will his father from hell force him to embrace the monster he was bred to be? A heavily guarded prisoner sits calmly in his cell as an angry interrogator promises him a grim fate, warning him to remember the faces of his victims, because tomorrow he is quickly heading straight against the wall. The prisoner mocks the man's speech before casually mentioning that the door swings both ways. Suddenly, the entire prison erupts into chaotic violence. The prisoner's heavily armed loyalists violently breach the facility, slaughtering the guards and tossing assault rifles to the newly freed inmates. As the mastermind walks through the terrifying carnage, he stops to inspect a weapon, complains about its quality, and ruthlessly executes a man to reclaim his freedom. This powerful crime boss is known only as Lee, and his reign of terror is just beginning. 2 months later, in a quiet rural hospital, an unidentified man with a severe head wound slowly regains consciousness. A kind doctor named Ailin tends to his makeshift sutures, apologizing that they are not that great. She gently asks him who he is and who did this to him, but the man has absolutely no memory of his past. Left with no identity, Ailin decides to call him Ishmael, taking the name from a patient data chart and her favorite book. As he recovers, Ailin helps him walk and explains that a local resident named Romley found him washed up on the nearby beach, barely clinging to life. Ishmael is haunted by fractured shadows in his mind, but nothing feels familiar or safe to him. Ailin offers him warm comfort and food, telling him not to be so tense, slowly building a gentle bond of trust between the two. Meanwhile, the crime boss Lee conducts a brutal meeting with a rival gang, lecturing them that patience is the essence of success. Disgusted by their inferior weapons and diluted contraband, Lee decides to cut ties violently. He calmly explains that massacring them will boost his fearsome reputation as the Sea Devil and the Father from Hell. His henchmen swiftly annihilate the rival crew. However, one desperate survivor begs for his life and offers Lee a piece of critical information to save himself. The frantic man reveals that on the exact day Lee escaped prison, a dying man was found on the beach and brought to a local hospital. The survivor claims this mysterious man was once very close to Lee. Intrigued, Lee spares the informant and sends one of his ruthless enforcers to the rural clinic to investigate this rumor. Back at the hospital, an aggressive thug arrives demanding medical attention for a damaged ear, intentionally causing a terrifying scene to draw attention. When a receptionist tries to calm him down, he violently threatens her, forcing Ailin to bravely intervene. The thug corners Ailin, ominously asking her about the dying beach boy. Recognizing the immediate danger, Ailin attempts to call security, but the enforcer brutally attacks her. Hearing the violent commotion, Ishmael rushes into the hallway. Acting on pure, reflexive combat instinct, Ishmael viciously fights the thug, delivering a series of bone-crushing strikes until the attacker is completely subdued. Ishmael desperately checks on a deeply shaken Ailin, who is now terrified by the sudden violence and the brutal, lethal skills her amnesiac patient just displayed. Realizing the rural clinic is no longer safe, Ailin tells Ishmael that he needs better medical care immediately. She reveals X-rays showing foreign fragments embedded deep in his skull near his hippocampus, which might be causing his total amnesia. Ailin begs him to come with her to Jakarta, where advanced medical facilities can safely remove the shrapnel. Ishmael, terrified that discovering his true identity might reveal he is a complete monster, hesitates to leave. He asks if she will still be there for him if he turns out to be a bad person. Ailin reassures him, firmly believing in his inherent goodness, and promises that whatever happens, they will meet again. She gives him a contact number and boards a bus bound for the ferry station, leaving Ishmael behind to process his thoughts. Tragically, Ailin's journey is abruptly halted in the middle of nowhere. Lee's heavily armed henchmen forcefully intercept the bus on a lonely stretch of road. The gang storms the vehicle, frantically searching for a man they refer to as Abdi. When they realize Abdi is not on board, they ruthlessly slaughter the innocent passengers, leaving a horrifying, bloody massacre. Only Ailin and a terrified little girl are kept alive and taken hostage by the syndicate. Back in the village, Ishmael realizes Ailin is in grave danger and races to the scene alongside the local man, Romley. They arrive to find the bus completely destroyed and heavily littered with dead bodies. One of Lee's thugs is preparing to chop up the victims and burn the evidence, casually pouring gasoline over the corpses. Ishmael furiously confronts the men, fighting them off with lethal precision, but in the ensuing skirmish, his brave savior Romley is brutally killed. After the bloody skirmish concludes, the police arrive and immediately take Ishmael into custody. In a dark interrogation room, an Interpol agent confronts Ishmael, aggressively dismissing his claims of innocence and friendship with Ailin. The agent reveals the horrifying truth about a terrorist mastermind named Lee, who kidnaps young children and forces them into a brutal life of crime. The agent explains that these stolen children are bred to be devoted smugglers, plunderers, and remorseless killers who turn the beaches blood red. The most terrifying of these assassins was a young man named Abdi, which is Ishmael's true, forgotten identity. The revelation shatters Ishmael entirely. But before he can fully process the gruesome truth of his past, the police station suddenly loses all power. The darkness brings a sudden, terrifying siege upon the precinct. Lee's syndicate violently assaults the station, effortlessly massacring the unprepared police officers in the pitch black. The Interpol agent is brutally killed during the initial ambush. Trapped in the dark corridors, Ishmael must rely entirely on his suppressed killer instincts. He systematically hunts down the heavily armed attackers, turning their own weapons against them in a desperate, bloody bid for survival. After violently clearing the station of enemies, Ishmael knows he has only one option left. He must go to war against his former crime family and his abusive father to rescue Ailin. Ishmael tracks the dangerous syndicate to a remote, heavily forested hideout. As he carefully navigates the treacherous terrain, he is intercepted by Baysai, a formidable enforcer and his former childhood friend. Seeing Baysai instantly triggers a horrifying flashback for Ishmael. He remembers being thrown into a deep, dark well alongside Baysai and a girl named Rika when they were just small, terrified children. Lee would deliberately starve the children for days, promising that only the one who fought and killed for the single bottle of water would survive the ordeal. This agonizing torture forged them into ruthless survivors and bonded them as severely traumatized siblings. Back in the present, Ishmael desperately pleads with Baysai to walk away and abandon Lee's toxic brainwashing. Baysai, fiercely loyal to the man who raised them, absolutely refuses, declaring that everyone must choose a side. A brutal, exhausting martial arts battle immediately ensues between the two brothers. Despite his fresh injuries, Ishmael gains the upper hand, ultimately killing Baysai with a devastating, lethal strike to the head. Deeply shaken by having to murder his loyal brother-in-arms, Ishmael continues his trek toward the beach, where he is suddenly ambushed by Rika. Enraged and grieving over Baysai's fresh corpse, Rika fiercely attacks Ishmael without hesitation. As they exchange devastating blows in the sand, another shocking piece of Ishmael's dark memory falls firmly into place. He completely realizes that Rika was the one who originally shot him in the head, causing his severe amnesia and leaving him for dead by the water. Ishmael absorbs multiple agonizing wounds from Rika's relentless, vengeful assault. In a brief moment of extreme vulnerability, Rika manages to gain the upper hand and holds Ishmael squarely at gunpoint. However, looking at the wounded man she once loved and deeply admired, she finds herself completely unable to pull the trigger again. She intentionally fires her gun away from him into the air, wasting her remaining bullets. In the ensuing confusion, Ishmael acts on pure, uncontrollable combat reflex and hurls a sharp knife, accidentally inflicting a fatal wound on Rika. Horrified by his own lethal instincts, Ishmael rushes to her side, holding her tightly and offering her emotional comfort in her final, tragic moments. Driven by immense grief and unstoppable rage, Ishmael finally infiltrates Lee's main, heavily fortified compound. Inside the chaotic bunker, he frantically searches and manages to locate Ailin. However, their highly anticipated reunion is far from joyful. Traumatized by the brutal kidnappings and the horrifying violence she has witnessed, Ailin initially recoils from Ishmael in sheer terror. She screams that he is exactly like the terrible monsters who abducted her, angrily blaming him for bringing this complete nightmare into her ordinary life. Heartbroken and filled with shame, Ishmael completely agrees with her, tearfully admitting his dark, violent past as an assassin. He gently reminds her that she bravely saved his life once before, and he emotionally begs her to save his fractured soul one last time by trusting him now. Moved deeply by his extreme vulnerability and genuine remorse, Ailin's overwhelming fear dissolves, and the two share a desperate, highly emotional embrace amidst the chaos. Their fragile moment of comfort is violently shattered when Lee suddenly enters the dimly lit room. Seeing his rebellious surrogate son, Lee erupts into a psychotic, uncontrollable rage. He is absolutely furious that Ishmael has slaughtered both Baysai and Rika, whom he sickeningly refers to as his favorite children. Lee loudly demands utter obedience, calling Ishmael a disloyal dog who betrayed his true family. Ishmael firmly refuses to be Abdi anymore, denouncing Lee as nothing but an abusive old man who bullies innocent kids. The two furious men launch into a savage, blood-soaked brawl to the death. Lee's overwhelming physical strength and vicious, experienced tactics quickly give him the upper hand, severely battering Ishmael across the room. The intensely brutal fight violently spills out of the compound and into the surrounding jungle terrain, summoning every last ounce of his fading willpower to protect Ailin. Ishmael finally turns the devastating tide of the battle. In a spectacular display of sheer endurance, Ishmael overpowers his abusive father figure and forcefully impales Lee onto a sharp, jagged branch protruding from a massive tree trunk. Coughing up thick blood, Lee makes one final, desperate attempt to take Ishmael down to hell with him. He aggressively tries to drag Ishmael onto the exact same fatal tree branch. Just as Lee is about to fiercely succeed, Ailin courageously leaps into the dangerous fray, helping Ishmael push back against the dying, monstrous crime lord. Overwhelmed by his catastrophic injuries and their combined, unwavering strength, Lee finally succumbs to his fatal wounds and dies, ending his horrible reign of terror permanently. Exhausted and bleeding profusely from his countless battles, Ishmael collapses heavily into the dirt as Ailin frantically calls his name, desperately begging him to stay awake. Sometime later, the relentless nightmare has finally ended. The cinematic scene beautifully transitions to a bright, safe hospital room located in Jakarta. Ishmael, heavily bandaged but fully stable, slowly opens his tired eyes. He finds Ailin sitting patiently by his quiet bedside, lovingly watching over him, just as she did when they very first met months ago. She offers him a warm, deeply reassuring smile, and Ishmael softly smiles back. Finally completely free from his dark, violent past, he has fully reclaimed his own soul, leaving the dangerous assassin Abdi behind forever. The intense movie closes on this tender, peaceful moment, beautifully hinting at a bright, hopeful future and a strongly rekindled romance between the man with no past and the brave doctor who proudly gave him a brand new future. If you really enjoyed this thrilling, action-packed movie recap today, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications so you never miss out on our awesome upcoming video breakdowns. Let us know down in the comments what exciting movie you want to see explained next. And as always, thank you so much for watching our channel.